Goes live. Okay, it's live and streaming. Hello, dear watchers, beautiful people. We are on the 86th Ayni Living Conversation, streaming live through Rumble, through YouTube, and in the recorded, you'll probably see this also recorded in Rumble, YouTube, and all of our platforms. I'm with Sacred Blue Heron Woman. I'm Julian Katari, and we are continuing. This is our fifth session of sustenance or sustain, one of the five main branches of the great principle, the great Tao, the great God that impregnates all of life according to latest scientific discoveries. And so we're covering a whole bunch of subjects that touch a lot on science, but speak of a great understanding, philosophical, spiritual, if you want to call it, understanding of life, which is crucial to help ourselves find our way into a fulfilling and natural and sustainable, not with the buzzword, but the true, truly balanced, truly in nature life, which is what Aloha and Living is here to facilitate. So how are you doing, Ingrid?
I am fabulous, and it's come to me in a couple of very clear words lately that it's a uniting of spirit with matter again, which has always been, but our paradigm has been to separate spirit and matter, which can't be separated, but we freaking try. So with Aloha and Living, we're once again uniting spirit and matter.
And that's crucial. You know, very lately, let me comment on that. I watched this guy that records pretty good shows about philosophy and sciences. He's just kind of about explaining things. He doesn't really have like a posture, right? So he's really cool. And he was talking about there's dualism. So we have dualism, which is this belief that because he totally explains that, and he has a video about how mechanistic thinking doesn't explain things like consciousness, and so it's not a. So there's got to be another like theory or about. So there's this dualism. So he explains what dualism is, having this like two separate things that never touch each other. So you have like the laws of matter, or the laws of physics, or the laws of the visible, touchable universe, and then you have like the spirit and the consciousness, but they're just totally untouched. They don't.
Not connected.
Dualism, not connected. But then there's another thing called what do you call it? Kind of like mysterism or mysterianism or something like that.
Mysticism?
Not really. No, that wouldn't be it. I forgot the word. Okay. But it's kind of like mysteryism, something like that. Okay. Which is pretty cool. I mean, it just explains that we just don't know about. You can't know it all. And then he goes through. I don't think he didn't go through that mystic thing well enough, I guess.
Right.
For me to associate it with solipsism. Now, why is my phone going dark? What's going on?
Okay. I don't know. It doesn't look dark to me.
I had to touch it because it kind of started going dark. Okay.
Yeah. Modern technology.
So, anyways, so there's, I guess we're on the breaking edge here of finding out what really is going on, and just to know that there isn't something that is well described and well written already about it. It's fantastic.
Well, incidentally, the words, and we're going to start again with the words from the old ones, and we're going to talk about that.
So let me introduce that a little bit. So every time we do this, or these latest shows we've been doing, the old ones, the ancient spirits,
The
well,
creators of all.
people should know that they're not dead. You can actually connect with the consciousness of other times, and that's a crucial thing to know where we're going, is to have that consciousness of the whole, not just
Right.
you and your very, very small space and time. It's impossible to be separated. You're actually a part of just a much bigger mission, much bigger legacy that you can any day just decide to open up to, and that this is what happens. You start receiving messages from the old one. So Sacred Blue Heron Woman here gives us a little bit of that language, of that spoken message. So here it comes. Very special. So please pay attention.
So we're hearing from Nukua again on the Tao. And she says, in your English language, Tao means the way in the sense of the way to go. And it also refers to nature in the sense of your own true nature being the way to go. And it also refers to nature, the natural world, as the way to go. So Tao is the philosophy of nature. And when you live close to the earth, you can see the wisdom of not interfering with the course of life and letting things go their own way. This is the wisdom that tells you humans not to get in your own way, to paddle with the current, split the wood along the grain, and to seek, inquire into the inner workings of your true nature instead of trying to change your true nature all the time or change yourself. So this is how inquiry sustains what we have created, and she's speaking for all three of them, Ishmukane and Laka. Inquiry into understanding the true value of yourselves as the free-willed individuals you are that are enfolded within the ever-changing patterns of the natural world that we created. So in the Far East, you find the religious feeling, and we'll say Far East, right? You find their religious feeling expressed in objects of nature. Their paintings, the ancient paintings, are all of nature. The basis of this is that they know that you, as human beings, are not someone who stands apart from nature and looks at it from the outside. You know that you're an integral part of it, fitting in and feeling at home. Yet in your Western Christian way of life, that some refer to as the West, you see pictures of angels and saints as your religious paintings. And because of this, your Western attitude is strangely different. And you speak of the conquest of nature, the conquest of space, the conquest of great mountains like Mount Everest. So I, Nukua, along with Ishmukane and Laka, ask of you, what on earth is the matter with you? Why must you feel as though you must fight with your environment all the time? Why can't you be grateful to the mountain that it lifted you up as you climbed to the top of it? Why can't you be grateful to the space that it opens itself for you so you can travel through it? Why do you even need to think of getting into fights with your natural world and with each other all of the time? Why do you need to use the powers of electricity and steel to carry on a battle continually with your external world? Why do you think you need to flatten your world instead of living with the natural contours and curvature? Why must you constantly try to beat your surroundings into submission? You humans have been brought up domesticated in mistrusting us, mistrusting the flow of life, and mistrusting yourselves. In the West, with your Christian Catholic beliefs, there is the doctrine of original sin that is totally fallacious, that has you humans all tied up in knots of mistrust. And as a result of your mistrust, you find the need to constantly interfere with the natural world. And so now you are and have been experiencing the law of diminishing returns. For example, you want to go faster and faster everywhere you go. So you attempt to obliterate the distance between yourselves and the place you're trying to reach, the hacks, right? Every single one of your spiritual gurus are about hacking, right?
Yeah.
As a result of this attempt to minimize the span of the Earth between these 2 points, 2 things happen. Number one, places that become closer and closer to each other by the use of jet planes tend to become the same place. So the faster you can get from Los Angeles to Hawaii, the more Hawaii looks exactly like Los Angeles.
Which is what's happened with the whole world. The more time goes by, the more it looks the same.
Exactly.
The more homogeneous it becomes.
So number two, you all think of your goals in life as destinations, points to which you must arrive. Your thinking begins to cut out all that makes a point worth having. The need for hacks. Again, it's like you're wanting to have just the 2 tiny ends of the banana without enjoying the whole banana. Or just to have crumbs from our table without enjoying the whole meal with us.
Or the cherry from the cake without the cake.
Exactly. So if you are radical enough to start trusting in the fact that we are good all of the time, and that the natural world you live in and your human nature is trustworthy, you will be amazed at how your world will change. You must understand that nature is that which happens of itself. So itself. So this is Nukua with the Chinese. Itself. So itself dash so. That is a process that is not under your human control, and you can trust this self-so process, which is autopoiesis. Same thing, almost same thing. Your entire natural world is the manifestation of the Tao, God, a process that defies intellectual comprehension. So as you fall into the governing principle of Wu Wei of not forcing, you will recognize that your true essential human nature, like all of nature, is of itself so. It's of itself so. Once you sit with that and let it sink in, you don't need much more explanation of itself so.
Mm-hmm.
You must let go and trust the goings on of your essential inherent humanness, not your domesticated personalities. You must allow all things to look after themselves and co-commit, which is Ayni, to conscious loving, conscious living in relationship to all of life, with all of life. So it's time for you humans to understand that in order to think about life, you have to make comparisons. So you have the yin and the yang, male and female, dark and light, hot and cold, heavy and light, right? You have to divide the world into opposites to be able to think about it. And then you go into fighting by making the opposites good and evil, standing on poles to fight each other about. And we want you to stop this nonsense and live by the Tao, the way and its power, because underneath the comparisons that you create to even think about life, there is unity. And to do this, you must get out of your own way and learn how to act without forcing conclusions. Learn how to live in skillful harmony with the processes of nature instead of trying to push them around. You must also understand that because of the inseparability of opposites, there's an underlying unity. They always go together. The opposites always go together. Hot always goes with cold. Always. Male always goes with female. Light always goes with dark. There's an underlying unity that ties these opposites, that combines these opposites. This unity is the Tao, the way of nature. Tao is a sort of nonsense syllable indicating the mystery that you humans can never understand, the unity that underlies opposites. If you stop defining Tao or God, you will learn to speak with God, with the Tao, as the power of expressing yourselves. Another piece of the mystery that you can never fully understand is that the Tao or God operates of itself. And there is nothing standing over it, making it go on in the same way that your body operates of itself. For instance, you can't get outside yourself to define yourself or control yourself. So since you are an integral part of the natural universe, you cannot hope to control or dominate it as if it's an object separate from you. We want you to know that whenever you have the feeling of being able to master yourself or become the Lord of nature, you have just simply forced your way of seeing things to conform to an illusion that makes you think nature is controlled objects and have invariably set up conflict inside the system. To understand the Tao, you must live in Wu Wei, not forcing. Non-doing, not forcing. And you need to understand that the activity of nature is not self-obstructive. Only you humans self-obstruct yourself. Nature works together as a unity and does not split apart from itself to do something to itself. But you humans try to do that all the time. In Wu Wei, also, you do not oppose strength with strength. You live in relaxed gentleness. What is relaxed gentleness? Well, all you have to do is look at a cat when it falls out of the tree, because it lets go of itself and completely relaxes. It lets go of itself and completely relaxes so it lands lightly on the ground. If it were to suddenly make up its mind that it didn't want to fall, it would become tense and rigid and would land on the earth as a bag of broken bones. So you must understand that you humans must let go of yourselves also. To live the Tao, the way of nature, is to know that you are falling out of the tree at every moment of your life. And then, as you realize you're falling out of the tree, you must stop trying to fit the order of the Tao, the universe, the God, into the order of your words. Experience is altogether something different from words. You can only experience the unfolding, the falling out of the tree. There's no way to describe the falling out of the tree. Just no way. Just like you cannot describe drinking water, what water tastes like. Just can't. You can't express it with words. So the order of the natural world that is naturally Tao is very different from the order you create with your human rules of syntax and grammar. The order of the world is very complex, while the order of words is relatively simple. So to use the order of words to try to explain life and its process is as clumsy of an operation as is trying to drink water with a fork. When you humans say that you're trying to make sense out of life, that means you're just trying to treat the real world as if it were a collection of words. So you're trying to fit a very complex order into a very simple system that's just not up to the task. So since we're talking about orders, in the Chinese language, there are two terms that signify these two different orders. The first term is the term Tsu, T-S-U, which means the order of things as measured or written down. And this refers only to the order of things as you think about them in words or numbers. The second term is Li, which is the actual order of nature, the Fibonacci spiral, the golden sequence, the sacred geometry, the organic patterns, the markings in jade, the grain in wood, the fiber in muscle. It's the complex pattern of the gaseous nebula with its indeterminate form. It's the sculpted layers forming patterns in rocks, the waves of formed on the sand. This order of Li is the infinite complexity of organic patterning, is also the order of your human bodies, your brains, your nervous system, your heart, your vascular system, your fascial system. So flowing with the Tao, participating in the Tao, is the art of feeling the way into your own essential nature, your dynamism of being. You humans resist this all the time by trying to impose a consistency on top of your ever natural changing spontaneity. And so you humans get in your own way because you are always observing and doubting yourselves and not inquiring into the flow. You're always trying to fit the order of the unfolding complex natural world into the order of your thoughts, words, and numbers. That is far too simple to contain the unfolding. So when you flow with the Tao, participate in the Tao, and live with the principle, live embodied in the principle of Wu Wei, not forcing, you return to a childlike freshness, not bothered by what other people are thinking or saying, and are willing to live in Ayni, which is also conscious co-commitment, conscious aloha, love, munai, and ever-expanding creativity. And next week, we'll hear from Ishmukane on more about Ayni and co-commitment.
Cool. Wow. That was pretty neat. So those are the words of the ancient ones, of the old ones, which next week will take the form of Ishmukane, which is, for people to know, the creator goddess of the creator couple, which is Ishmukane and Ishpiyakok in the Maya world.
Right.
Which is the theme here in Aloha, Ayni Living, the Ishmukane. So now I guess we continue with sustenance.
Right. So how do the old ones sustain what they've created? Mm-hmm. So tonight we're going to talk about the natural drift.
Natural drift, okay.
Yes. So we've seen, we've heard, we've talked about how multicellular organisms like ourselves are born from the coupling of cells descending from a single cell, and how every metacellular organism as one element in generational cycles that always goes through a multicellular stage is simply a variation on the same theme. All this results in ontogenies of living beings capable of reduction and phylogenies of different reproductive lineages that intertwine in a gigantic and diverse historical network. This is clear in your surrounding world of plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and in the differences we see in ourselves as human beings and other living beings. So this great network of historical transformations of living beings is the warp and woof of our existence as historical beings. So now we need to go deeper into the mechanisms of historical structural transformation. For without this knowledge, there is no understanding of the phenomenon of cognition, which is primarily a human thing. I don't know that animals have cognition. So anyway, how is it that fish are so naturally aquatic and elk are so naturally adapted to where they live? So to answer these questions, we must look more closely and explicitly at how interactions occur between living beings and their environment. Ontogeny is the history of structural changes in a particular living being. So in this history, each living being begins with an initial structure, which is tectogenesis. This structure conditions the course of its interaction and restricts the structural changes that interactions may trigger in it. At the same time, it is born in a particular place in the medium that constitutes the ambiance in which it emerges and in which it interacts. This ambiance appears to have structural dynamics of its own, operationally distinct from the living being. So, as observers, we've now distinguished the living system as a unity from its background and have characterized it as a definite organization. And now we've also distinguished two structures that we will consider to be operationally independent of each other: the living being and its environment. Between the living being and its environment, there is a necessary structural congruence, or the unity would disappear. In interactions between the living being and the environment, with in this structural congruence, the perturbations of the environment do not determine what happens to the living being. It's actually the structure or the tectogenesis of the living being that determines what changes occur in it. So the interaction with the environment is not it is instructive, but it does not determine what its effects are going to be. It's just the interaction triggers an effect.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, the changes that result from the interaction between the living being and its environment are triggered by the disturbing agent or the perturbation and are determined by the structure of the disturbed system. The same holds true for the environment. The individual is the source of perturbations and not of instructions. So we just cause disarray. We don't, we cause a perturbation, trigger a change. I kind of like the word perturbation. It makes you stop and have to really pronounce it. As scientists, we can deal only with unities that are structurally determined. So we can deal only with systems in which all their changes are determined by their structure and in which these structural changes are as a result of their own dynamics or are triggered by interactions with their environment. So in our daily lives, we behave as scientists, as though all the things we encounter are structurally determined unities. So a car, a sewing machine, a computer, so on. This everyday attitude both helps and hinders us because there are 4 domains or classes that the structure of a unity specifies. There's the domain of changes of state, which is changes a unity can undergo without a change in its organization. This is a conservation of class identity. Then there's the domain of destructive changes, which changes a unity can undergo with loss of organization and loss of class identity. Then there's the domain of the perturbations, the triggering agents, the interactions that trigger changes of state. And the domain of destructive perturbations is, as it says, all perturbations result in a destructive change. So for instance, a compact car crashing into a tree is a domain of destructive interaction. However, for an M1 Abrams tank, that would be a mere perturbation. So in a dynamic, structurally determined system, since the structure is in ongoing change, structural domains will also change, although they will be specified at every moment by their present structure. As long as the unity does not crash into the tree, does not enter into a destructive interaction with its environments, we as observers will necessarily see a compatibility or congruence between the structure of the environment and the structure of the unity. As long as this compatibility exists, environment and unity act as mutual sources of perturbation, triggering changes of state. This process is called structural coupling. Living beings are not unique in their determination, nor are they unique in their structural coupling. What is proper to them is that structural determination and coupling in them take place within the framework of ongoing conservation of autopoiesis that defines them, and that everything in them is subordinate to that conservation, which means the saving of that state. So every structural change that occurs in a living being is necessarily limited by the conservation of its autopoiesis, its self-so. Right? And those interactions that trigger structural changes compatible with that conservation are perturbations, and those that do not are destructive interactions. Ongoing structural change of living beings with conservation of their autopoiesis or self-so-ism is occurring at every moment, continuously in many ways at the same time. It's the throbbing of all life. It's the dynamism of being. So when we as observers speak of what happens to an organization in a specific interaction, we are in a particular situation. And on one hand, we have access to the structure of the environment, and on the other, to the structure of the organism. And we can consider the many ways in which both have changed their encounter if the interactions had been different. From this perspective, the structural changes that occur in a unity appear as selected by the environment through a continuous chain of interactions. So we could see the environment as the selector of structural changes that the organism undergoes in its ontogeny. But we could say the same thing about the environment, because structural coupling is always mutual, it's always co-committed. Both organism and environment undergo transformations. Structural coupling, or Ayni, co-committance, between organism and environment takes place between operationally independent systems. So if we now turn our attention to the maintenance of the organisms as dynamic systems in their environment, this maintenance will appear to us as centered on a compatibility of the organisms with their environment, and we call this adaptation. So the adaptation of a unity to its environment is a necessary consequence of that unity's structural coupling with the environment. So in other words, every ontogeny as an individual history of structural change is a structural drift that occurs with the conservation of organization in adaptation. So conservation of autopoiesis, or self-so, and conservation of adaptation are necessary conditions for the existence of living beings. That's how they're sustained. The ontogenic structural change of a living being in an environment always occurs as a structural drift congruent with the structural drift of the environment. The drift will appear to the observer as having been selected by the environment throughout the history of interactions of the living being as long as it's alive. So then we get into phylogeny and transformation. A phylogeny is a succession of organic forms sequentially generated by reproductive relationships. The changes experienced throughout the phylogeny constitute phylogenetic change. There is not a single case in the structural history of living beings which does not reveal that each lineage is a particular case of variations on a basic theme over an interrupted sequence of productive changes with conservation of autopoiesis and adaptation. Natural drift is a process in which organism and environment remain in continuous structural coupling. Imagine yourself standing on the peak of a hill with a bowl of water, and you're flicking drops of water, always in the same direction. So you note that there are variations in how the drops begin to fall. Now imagine that the successive drops are leaving marks on the ground as a record of their fall. And if you repeat this experiment many times, you will get slightly different results every time. Some drops will go straight down. Others will meet with obstacles that they elude in different ways. The wind may change and move the drops, so the marks left by the previous drops will leave a different surface for the subsequent ones, and so on indefinitely. And now, if you follow the trails left by each drop and mark out the paths as though the water had been spilled all at once, this is how the common ancestral organism gives rise to descendants with slight structural changes every time. We've skipped the reproductive changes because we're representing the unfolding of the lineages. So following the water paths as these flick the drops down the hill shows that natural drift will follow only the courses that are possible at each instant, often without any great variation in the appearance of the organism, which is the phenotype, and often with many ramifications depending on the kinds of organism-environment relations that are conserved. So organisms and environment vary independently. The organisms at each reproductive stage and the environment according to different dynamics. So now imagine another view of the paths. You're still standing on the hill and you've emptied the whole bowl and you're looking at the paths the water has taken, the drops have taken. The primordial form is now at the center, and all the paths are like branches that emerge from the center and keep spreading out like branches from a tree trunk. Since every autopoietic system is a unity of many interdependencies, when one dimension in the system is changed, the whole organism undergoes correlative changes in many dimensions at the same time. But because we don't or can't see all the factors involved, structural drift seems to be a process that is haphazard. Natural drift is a process of the conservation of autopoiesis and adaptation. As in the case of the water drops, there is no need for an outside guiding force to generate diversity and complementarity between organism and environment. Nor is the guiding force needed to explain the directionality of the variations in the lineage, nor is it the case that some specific quality of living beings is optimized. Natural drift is somewhat like a sculptor with wanderlust. She goes through the world collecting things and then combines them in such a way that their structure and circumstances allow, with no other reason than that what is able to combine them. And so as she wanders about, intricate forms are being produced, and these forms are composed of harmoniously interconnected parts that are a product not of design, but of natural drift. With no governing standard, and I've been sitting with that, pausing on that, because I'm wondering if that denies spirit and matter.
Okay.
Right. I don't have an answer to that. That's just come to me because a lot of these scientists are still denying. I believe that it's true that there's no need for an outside guiding force. I think it's all internal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're always looking for, is the outside guiding force. But then he goes into saying that the guiding force is not needed. So I'm sitting on the fence with presenting this all of a sudden. As I've really come into this uniting of spirit and matter, I think science is really doing a poor job of uniting. They're not even trying to unite spirit and matter. So anyway, that was just a kind of side journey there. So with no other governing standard than the conservation of an identity and the capacity to reproduce, we have all emerged. It is what interconnects us to all things and what is fundamental to us. And yeah, now that those words, uniting spirit and matter, have come to me, I'm not really sure about that statement. So
well, I would put myself in the position of saying that they're not divided.
They're not, but science.
So how do you unite something that is not divided?
Inherently, it's not divided, but science has divided it. We humans have divided it, and so we're still saying that it's divided. That's why. And I'm not sure. I'm not absolutely certain. I'm not going to say without a doubt that he's Francisco Umberto Maturana has divided them. But now that I'm sitting with it, it kind of feels like it. But I'm always open. That's an inquiry. Is this division or not? Is this right?
Well, I think that we have to go through a process of fragmentation, of kind of I mean, because what we understand sometimes as science is looking down the microscope, right?
Yeah,
So what is that? It's like we're in a very big world, and we have so much information available just with our senses and just with our minds being clear, and yet we have this apparent need to go into looking into the really small realms, and to divide the atom, and to divide the particles, and to create this massive thing, the hadron collider, so that we can understand particles.
right.
And I think we had to kind of go through that, as it was part of the divine free
The, nat-
will
the
of
natural
exploration,
drift,
right? But
right?
then it's never going to be the answer or the way.
Right.
You know, we can, the time will come when we say that is, yeah, we went through it, we had it, we got our data from that, we can use that, surely, but we're far from needing that to understand the world.
Right.
We don't need that.
Right.
It's not the answer. You won't find the answers in the
In the
micro
fragmentation.
fragmentation.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, so they're trying to describe fragments, I guess, and yes, we do need those descriptions of the
Well,
fragments, and you can't Frankenstein stuff up. You can't create the whole from the fragments. That's what sometimes happens. I see, right? You
well,
get fragment, and you try to make a whole from that, and I don't
without
think it works.
recognizing that the fragment is the whole. Right.
Right.
That's the problem. They're not, and there's like Vikua just said in the fragmentation. We yeah, you're right. Alexis, I couldn't get the little ones up tonight. Um, in the fragmentation kind of helps us understand the world, but we don't recognize the underlying unity that's unexplainable. I guess that's what I'm getting at, is the uniting of spirit and matter. In fragmenting, we've forgotten about that unity of that unites the spirit, the living, the ambiance with the matter, the Tao with the matter, God with the matter.
Yeah.
Ishmukane, Laka, Nukua with the matter. We keep them all separate
Mm-hmm.
because we only go see them on Sundays in church, Wednesday evenings, right?
Yeah.
They don't come in the lab. They have no
Right.
place in the lab.
Exactly. You know how that's a powerful statement, where, by, I guess, to me, that the way I'm seeing it is, it's a point of view. So there's the logic point of view, or a perspective. So you can get only so much information from one perspective. You never get the whole from. You see the whole. That's where you say, okay, from in any perspective, you will see the whole. Whatever you're seeing through that perspective is the whole, right? But by no means does the whole fit in that perspective.
Right.
And you can get so much more information if you would allow other perspectives. For example, if you're a scientist, then you're looking at molecules, or you're looking at cells, and if your mindset wouldn't be so encased in what you're allowed to think and know,
Right.
by your academy, and you would, had some contact with nature or with the spirit, then you would probably get these messages and these
Right.
this
Right.
this other information in that thing you're seeing
The
that would,
open-ended inquiry.
right, you would get so much more out of your inquiry if you would be more transdisciplinary, if you would be
Right.
allowed yourself to be more complete. But we're not complete, we're extremely fragmented into. And to this, I have to add that in this part of the story is there's the domination kind of, um, there is an intent and obviously an agenda, and a very successful
Well,
agenda
yeah, it's the
of
fighting with the environment, it's the conquest. Like,
restricting the information, limiting the information, occulting the information, occulting the truth, because in that you get the power of deceiving people
well,
and
that's why
taking over the
inquiry
power.
sustains. Open inquiry is what stains. Open inquiry into what is life, what really is life, and that's, I know at some point, I can't pinpoint the time, but I know at some point in my nursing career, as much as I loved it, I know there was at some point, the thought crossed my mind: is this really all there is to life? Working for an hourly wage so that I can hopefully maybe retire someday and not have to go to work all the time, and can spend more time at home enjoying life, and then die. And that inquiry, that thought that crossed my brain, that is what I know totally upended my life. And that's actually what sustains life, is that inquiry of, is this really all? Is this really all there is? Whoever came up with the idea that we're born, we go to school, we make a living, and we die, and we retire, and somewhere in there maybe we'll have time to take vacation and enjoy other spots. But because we're so in such a hurry to get from point A to point B, as Nukua said, now Hawaii looks exactly like Los Angeles. So we didn't really need to get on a plane at all.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So this was really, I mean, it's really helpful to what these researchers are trying to say. If I was to summarize it, the what we think science is, and the understanding of biology and physics and all, has been very strongly impregnated with the philosophy of domination that
Oh,
has
absolutely. Conquest.
and limited whatever information we are seeking. So these scientists are, all they're doing is kind of, maybe in a limited way, because they could do so much more, but they're doing something. They're proving that there's another philosophy, underlying philosophy, that is not that the competition of the species, as we all are taught that evolution is, and so many like that, so many ideologies like that one, that are intertwined in what we think science is. So these scientists, what they're doing is proving that wrong, and the more they continue studying, the more they're gonna start touching things that they cannot, they're gonna have to defragment themselves. They're gonna have to understand that how consciousness plays that role in the shaping, right, in the design,
Or the Tao, right? The way of nature, the self-so-ism, but they don't want to admit that. They think that's all just natural selection, natural drift, which is part of the process. that it is part of the ontogenic process. However, they're still totally denying the spirit, the energy part of it, the spiritual, the ancient ones.
Right.
Like they're still trying to deny the ancient ones, God, the Tao.
And
right?
I would say that comes from deep in themselves. They're still, it's a type of, I would call it racism, in the sense where there's a sense that this modern culture is superior to all the other cultures that
Right.
existed. That all the other cultures that existed, yeah, they had some good knowledge, but we are so much better. We're so much more advanced.
Yeah.
And that takes us to this, what I was saying about us thinking that the microscopes and the technology gives us so much more power to understand the universe. And I think we're going to come to the conclusion that it doesn't, that just our plain existence in nature gives us a lot better understanding of the dynamics of nature than all these apparatuses that magnify and zoom in and quantify stuff.
Just the dynamics of falling, thinking of falling, like Nukua said, when you live in the Tao, in participation with the Tao, in the flow of Tao, you're always falling out of the tree. So when you start learning how to fall, that's why we're so rigid, because we don't know how to fall. That's why we have so much back pain, because we don't know how to fall. Because we're so scared of falling, because we're so fucking superior. We don't need to fall.
But we do need, I mean, do you really want to be superior? Then I came to the conclusion that the best, the most intelligent thing I can have to become more knowledgeable and more wise is the humility to, or the openness to see how wrong I am.
It's so like
the more wrong I see myself, the more open I am to getting out of that wrongness. If I'm not willing to see how wrong I am, then I'm always right, and then I'm not growing. I'm not learning.
Like the cat falling out of the tree, right? What's more superior, landing lightly on your feet and landing lightly fully intact, or landing dead as a broken bag of bones because you decided you were resisting that you're too superior to fall?
Then obviously that in the interaction of daily life, we have to consider that, of course, people need to, in whatever situation they're in, make a living. And so you can't go through life with this extreme openness, and so then you never sound confident about what you're speaking. It's a very delicate balance where you need to be open to being wrong, but then when you're given if you're exposing your knowledge, you have to say it like you own it. You can't expose it like, well, I'm not sure about this. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. I mean, it's really complicated to get the balance. We have to be playing these games with
dynamic balance.
Yeah.
Dynamic balance, because the best illustration of dynamic balance is a ballerina who's spinning on her tippy toes. It takes a constant maneuvering. It's not like she just stands there and twirls. There's a constant adjusting, and when you start to, that's what I'm finding as I'm on this journey of physically learning how to fall, is it's a constant adjustment. It really, really is. It's conscious, constant adjustment. And that's to equate it to a mechanical thing, is a heat-seeking missile is off course 99.9% of the time, but it's always adjusting. And that's the nature of inquiry that sustains us is always adjusting, because the truth is always adjusting. Truth, there is no fixed truth.
The reality of movement. There's nothing
Always
standing still.
adjusting.
Absolutely nothing is standing still. That's
Right.
pretty amazing. And but then we need to have, at least very temporarily, some type of fixation, some type of stability. And I guess that's part of the
Well, that's the
like the
trust.
dancer. I mean, you see her very stable when she's turning around.
Yeah. Well, and that's the trust in the constant dynamic adjustment.
Yeah.
That's the trust in the Tao, the flow, right? It seems like very unstable, but it's actually very stable, because everything's constantly adjusting. Nothing's ever fixed.
Mm-hmm.
We think there's so much stability in being fixed, but there's actually no stability in being fixed.
Right. Pretty wise words. So what will we be flowing into next week?
We are flowing into behavior.
Just behavior, like that, plainly behavior. Is this part of the great principle?
Yeah, it's still the sustenance.
Okay.
Behavioral domains. That's what we'll be flowing into.
Wow. Does that touch on the archetypes and that kind of thing?
Kind of.
The habits?
Kind of.
Wow. Well, we'll see what that is going to bring. We have already spoken a little bit about the morphogenic fields, how that has been a little bit useful for us, Rupert Sheldrake's inquiries.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that in other videos, but so you can go check that. But this is definitely going to be a step ahead or a step further.
Yeah.
But that's so much of the key to whatever you want to do to heal. If you want to grow, because everybody wants to grow, everybody wants to be better, everybody wants to be more free, everybody wants, and not just for yourself, everybody wants the world to be free, everybody wants to see less suffering on other beings, everybody wants to see less destruction. And how do we get there? Well, this is a big part of that, is working in ourselves, in our understanding, and making ourselves part of that, a pivotal part of that change, of that shift, of that evolution, of that growth. As we put it, if, of course, and that's like our big statement here, and what I think makes us stand apart from the crowd, is a way outside, do all this away and outside of the system of the money domination. If it's not through the logic of money, of business, then it's no good. Every single other guru has been prayed by this demon of, make it work, whatever you're doing, make it work through the logic of the money.
Right.
If you're not making money, it's no good. That's so that's what makes us really stand apart, and that's what that's maybe the core calling of Aloha, Ayni Living, is let's grow, and spiritually, let's grow physically, let's become more free, let's become more healthy, let's come together. What we talked about today, let's come together, let's get away from the isolation, let's get away from the loneliness, let's get away from the solipsism, and let's
finding the unity, uniting
make
spirit
a
with
commitment.
matter, and co-committing.
let's face the work. Let's take on the work that nobody wants to take on. Let's stop procrastinating our evolution as human
Yeah.
beings. And here it is. So welcome to the next session, or I invite you to the next session next week at the same time, 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. And if you want to check out the website, aloha-living.com, and you'll find us everywhere with that name. And if you want to join us, you're always welcome to join us and join the conversation, join the group, join the community, join the project, become an idea hero, become a rancher, become a volunteer, become a designer, become a co-creator.
Be radical.
A what?
Be radical.
Be radical.
Yeah.
Okay, be radical then. Yeah. And all with fun, all with, it's obviously so difficult to imagine all of this without imagining one of these structures, these morphic structures, these archetypes that we are so familiar with of, oh, maybe they're just cold. Oh, maybe they're this, or, and no, all of that old structures don't really apply to this. That's what.
And I kind of really like the idea of the sculptor with wanderlust who picks up pieces here and there, because that's basically what I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the squirrel who grabs this and this and this, and oh, can they go together? Yeah, they go together, and they actually look pretty damn good together. They work. Right? I kind of really like that. That's the experimenter that's being radical of. Yeah.
And then anybody can join and become part of that process.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we are done.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for being here and for listening. The most difficult task is that of listening.
Yeah.
Okay, so see you next week.
Yeah.